Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. We're here for the news this morning on April the 27th. It's a Monday as well, of course. We're going to be looking at a couple of bits of news today. It looks as though football may be coming back and we may well have a date for it, which is massive news. Very exciting news, very interesting news, very good news really, I think, for a lot of people. I saw the tweet the other day, well actually last night. I just had a warm sense, a warm happiness flow through me. Strange phrase. And also we're going to be looking at David De Gea, who is coming up to 10 years at the club, and he looks as though, I don't know whether it's because every other top club in Europe's got a good goalkeeper these days, or because he actually really likes Man United again, looks as though he may well be staying at United for the long haul, and we'll look a little bit at how that might affect the Dean Henderson situation as well, and get your comments in about that, whether you think United should look to extend De Gea's contract. He only signed one last year, but it looks as though he's willing to stay for a long time at Old Trafford. First of all, good morning everyone. How is everyone doing? Mark says good morning, Joe. Good morning, Mark. Good morning, Harrison. Good morning, everyone. Hope De Gea stays, but wouldn't that hamper Dean Henderson to play or potentially want to make him leave? Well, yeah, you can't have two first-choice goalkeepers, can you? I don't think that's something that you just don't see, because a goalie can play pretty much every game in a season, really. So, yeah, there's definitely questions to be answered there. Let's have a look then at our first story today, and our main story, and this is a big one, I think, coming from the Times, and this is the Premier League plan for Project Restart in bid to resume season, outlining the need for 3 weeks of training, a window between June 8th and July 27th to complete the current season, and August 22nd to start the 2021 season. Let's get into it. This is again coming from the Times. The Premier League is planning to resume the season with matches at approved stadiums when the government grants permission for clubs to return to action. The Times can reveal that a cross-sport group is working with government officials on behalf of professional sports looking to return to action as soon as possible. Several sports are looking to use a limited number of venues in an effort to reduce the spread of coronavirus while cutting down the need for policing, medical support and testing. The Premier League shared its plan to continue the season, labelled Project Restart, which is pretty cool, at a meeting of shareholders last week in which the idea of playing matches behind closed doors at a limited number of stadiums was discussed. There's no mention, as far as I can see, of what those stadiums would be, so it's hard to know whether we'll be getting games at Old Trafford, games wherever. But I suppose, in a way, it doesn't really matter where they are, because it's all going to be behind closed doors anyway, if that wasn't made completely clear. It will all be behind closed doors, so in a sense it doesn't necessarily, I suppose, if United are playing home games at Old Trafford, having that routine of getting to the stadium, training on the pitch, warming up on the pitch, getting in the dressing rooms may give you some advantage, but I doubt that there's a good chance that both teams will be playing at a neutral ground. From what I'm getting from this anyway, so I'm not sure that the Old Trafford thing is such a big deal. No top flight football has been played since the start of the suspension matches on March 13th, as we know. The lacking of testing in the UK remains the biggest obstacle for the return to sports. Yeah, one of the reasons the UK has got such a sort of shocking mortality rate on the virus is because the testing is just so low. I think we've got almost a 10% mortality rate, which is far exceeds the genuine mortality rate of the virus, and it's because of a lack of testing. Because if we'd have tested more people, a lot more people would have been given positive results, and therefore the sort of ratio of people recovering to not recovering would look a lot more favourable. But yeah, one of the problems that we do have in England is this lack of testing. So that is going to be probably the biggest obstacle, because all of the players are going to need to be tested, all the managers, all the coaching staff, the groundsmen, the security, any media that are allowed there, cameramen, that sort of thing, will all have to be tested before each game. Again, there's another. Let's keep reading through. There's because the date, like I said, at last week's Premier League meeting, a number of scenarios were discussed with a potential restart date of June 8th already widely reported. That does seem to be the day that they have penciled in for now, and it does seem to be the date that sort of goes along with other teams, other countries in Europe. Germany already planning on returning in the next couple of weeks. I think at the middle of May they're looking to return, and this follows news as well that the Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has announced that professional sports team can resume training on May the 18th, which would allow a similar 2-week period. So May the 18th, it's just over 2 weeks until June 8th. So it's a similar kind of time frame that they seem to be operating under as well. Obviously, Italy hit, I think, more hard by the coronavirus than most countries. So to see them coming back for a similar time is promising. A failure to resume the season could have significant financial impact on a number of Premier League clubs. In response to that, the Premier League is now working with DLA Piper, a law firm that has advised on TV rights deals for the Premier League in the past, on an emergency loan fund with a maximum of £10 million per club. Premier League clubs have been in negotiations with players over wage reductions and deferrals, as we've seen. Southampton, West Ham, Sheffield United and Watford have agreed deferrals with their first team squads, while the majority of Arsenal's players have agreed to a 12.5% wage reduction. Before matches, additional changing facilities would be provided to maintain social distancing. There would also be distancing measures in place for pre-match warm-ups, which you can't distance between the players. Pre-match warm-ups, I get maybe the coaches, but I get the changing rooms. I understand because you've got kit men, you've got people making food and drink, and you've got catering, you've got media, that sort of thing, doing interviews and all that sort of stuff. I understand why the social distancing could be implemented there. You can't social distance the players who are about to play against each other, and then all of a sudden from a corner there's 16 of them in the box and they're all elbowing and jumping up and sweating on each other. That just seems token at best to me. I don't quite understand what having this isolated warm-up does. But anyway, let's carry on. The meeting last week, clubs were told the official timing partner for the Premier League would switch from Tag Heuer to Hublot. Whoa, there's the big news, lads. Both luxury brand watch brands are subsidiaries of LVMH Moet Hennessy. Oh, so, they hide the big news in the last paragraph. UEFA, the European governing body, has ruled that sporting merit should be applied to determine England's top 4 Champions League places should the Premier League be unable to finish the season. Now, the reason I read that last paragraph there, as we spoke about the other day, this sporting merit idea, which was deemed to be points per game the last time I saw, the other thing to take into consideration there is there has been no mention of returning to European games. Obviously, City is still left in the Champions League, United is still left in the Europa League, and there has been so far no mention of timescales, grounds, locations for that kind of thing. I think it looks as though, to me, if I was guessing, I think a globe-trotting or certainly Europe-trotting tournament such as the Europa League or the Champions League, I think we're going to struggle to see that play at the moment. I would be surprised if we saw a conclusion to either the Champions League or the Europa League. This is also in times that the UK has urged Premier League and other sporting competitions to step up their planning for a return to action in hope of lifting the national mood during the coronavirus pandemic. So it does seem as though football and the Premier League specifically are being given certain a slightly longer lead, let's say, compared to everyone else in this time. I suppose what would have to be done again, as we said before, there would have to be testing before every game. Anytime new groups of people are in contact with each other, there will have to be testing. One thing that has yet to be sort of announced or there are no plans on so far is what happens if, let's say we're 6 games, what was there, 10 games left? We're 6 games into that return, and all of a sudden, Bruno Fernandes tests positive for coronavirus. Is it all gone again? Or is he just brought out, we test everyone else if they're fine? What do teams have got players being taken out of their positions, out of their teams because they've got it, so they can't play, take them out. It seems as though we're only a sort of a fraction, a snap of a dry spaghetti away from this all being cancelled and called off again. If Ole Gunnar Solskjaer or Paul Pogba or any player for any club test positive for coronavirus during this sort of mini tournament, there's going to be a very large percentage of people who think that the whole thing will have to be cancelled or the whole thing will have to be postponed again. It's almost as though this is a final roll of the dice, isn't it? If we try and come back on June the 8th, if this doesn't work, if someone else tests positive for coronavirus, then that's it. Because we can't keep postponing it for 2 weeks, come back, postpone it for 2 weeks, come back. Because the money, the costs, everything to set all this up, the tests. It's going to be a very much a tricky one. How can you distance between players? You can't. Can't wait. Betting on horse racing in the Gulf Stream is starting to get a tad boring and expensive. 6 foot distance between players, yeah. That might be good from United defending set pieces. That was a good joke, wasn't it? Because we're not very good at defending set pieces. It's going to be 6 months at least before people are back in the stadiums. I would expect it to be a lot longer than 6 months. I can't imagine 75,000 people being allowed to congregate together, certainly until 2021. Maybe, depending on when a vaccine. I would guess that has to be post-vaccine, doesn't it? And especially since we don't currently know whether immunity is built by having the disease. Even we don't have proper data on that. So the chances of everyone just spreading that disease back again at something that is as unnecessary. Obviously, it's a huge part of football fans' lives, but in terms of the safety of people and what is a genuinely necessary activity, just going to watch the football in world terms and in health terms is very much toward the bottom of that list, down there with sort of music festivals and public lynching. If Joe Rogan can buy tests for all his guests, I'm sure football teams can follow suit. Well, there's a difference because, first of all, Joe Rogan has maybe 3 guests a week, and so maybe sort of triple that people turning up there. So say even at most he has to do 20 tests a week, which is probably going to cost him around $4,000. Maybe. Was it $200 a test? Yeah. The Premier League people will have to do 300 tests per game. They're talking about, which is 10 times every player, 10 times for every team. So that's 3,000 times that by 20. That's 60,000 tests. And I think there so far have only been about 200,000 taken in the whole of England, in the whole of Britain. Sorry, not even England. So all of a sudden, that's what is that? That's almost a quarter. That's over a quarter of all tests that have so far been taken in Britain will have to be taken in 6 weeks just from the Premier League. And these aren't people suspected of having anything. These are just precautionary, make sure they haven't got it. So you're taking it away from people who potentially have this virus, for people who we're almost certain don't, but we just have to make sure because the money's good. So that's a potential issue there, because 60,000 tests or so over a 6 week period, and there aren't really enough tests in Britain at the moment anyway. I think there could be potential sort of human rights. I know it's sort of a big statement, but almost sort of human rights issues with that, where you can't really be taking away such a large portion of tests. Although presumably we were supposed to have 150,000 tests per day by the end of April. That's not happening, is it? I think we've only had 200,000 already. Can you just lie to us and say it's all going to be okay? Mark, it's all going to be okay. 20 months. Who said 20 months? Who said 20 months? Is that someone else in the comments? Football safety shouldn't be played for 20 months. Yeah, I think football shouldn't be played for 20 months. That's just an arbitrary number, isn't it? But I see your point, though. What would that be? Take us up to 2013? I think we should be all right before then. It's going to be 6 months at least. Yeah, exactly. This won't be over till next year at the earliest. Just do what Ajax did, scrap it, no one wins and no one relegated. Well, I think there's a few. The difference is, to be honest, there isn't really a difference. I think the difference is the money that the Premier League can maybe afford to sort of set up this strange kind of camp structure where we've got all these teams in a relatively small location, not obviously social distancing small, but let's say it's, where would it, it depends where they're going to play them, maybe in a sort of, I don't know whether they'll go by safety rating into hygiene rating, because in that case, I'm sure a lot of the stadiums in London seem a lot newer. There's the Emirates, there's Tottenham Stadium, there's a lot of newer stadiums in London, but London seems to be the epicenter at the moment in Britain, at least, of the virus. Or they'll go like a neutral location, maybe Birmingham, Wolverhampton, that kind of area. So you've got Birmingham's ground, Villa Park, you've got Molineux as well. It depends. They might choose the northwest. You've got Liverpool, you've got Man City, you've got United's grounds. There's other Premier League accredited grounds, Wigan, Bolton as well, all nearby. So it's hard to know what they'll do with things, but the Premier League are in a relatively unique position financially, where they can set up such a ad hoc, short-term solution to this problem, and I don't necessarily think that Holland are in a position to do that. Someone says it has to be St George's Park, potentially. Again, we'll just have to see, won't we? Anyway, EPL Island like the UFC Island. Well, the UFC Island didn't actually happen, did it? Because they weren't allowed to, because Disney put too much pressure on them. So, as much as a Premier League Island would be quite funny, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Right, let's move on to our second story. And this is David De Gea, who's coming up to 10 years at Old Trafford. And he's talking about his dedication and commitment and willingness and eagerness to stay at United for the long term. This is from the Daily Mail. David De Gea signals his intention to stay at Man United for many years, despite emergence of young Dean Henderson on loan at Sheffield United. De Gea signals his intention to stay at Manchester United as their number one, saying he wants to remain at Old Trafford for many years. The Spaniard's position could become under serious threat with the emergence of Dean Henderson, the young goalkeeper who has impressed on loan at Sheffield United, but De Gea, who signed a long-term contract in September, worth £375,000 a week, which is insane, isn't it? Has no plans to leave the club, even though he turns 30 in November and will celebrate the 10th anniversary of his £18.9 million move next summer. Now, if we could just get a quote from David De Gea and all this, would love. There's a lot of videos on this page and it's very slow loading. Apologies. I'm getting older, he said. It's just to be part of this club is amazing. So imagine 10 years, it's like a dream. It's great to play games with this club, so I hope I can be here for more years, many years. I think the whole team has improved a lot. We're in a good moment. I think we're in good top form. We didn't concede many goals, and of course with Bruno, he brings a lot of quality. He's a clever player, a top midfielder. The team improved with him, and it was a pity that everything stopped because we were in a good moment. But hopefully, with some players that were injured, we'll be fit when it all starts again. So it will be a good challenge for everyone. Now, let me know what you think to the whole De Gea Henderson sort of conundrum that we face at Old Trafford at the moment. Because De Gea, who has been, if you take the last 5 years as an average, I would say the best goalkeeper in the world. Obviously, he's had a less than, what would you say? Less than his sort of standard 12 months. He's not been particularly great in the last year or so. But I think that, he's earned a little bit of time to have a dip in form and come back from it. But it's going to be an interesting one because Dean Henderson is in his second loan year at Sheffield United, and will he go for another year? Will he go for another 2 years? De Gea's still got 4 years left on his contract, as we talked about there. So it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to get rid of him. I'm not saying that we should want to get rid of him, but £375,000 a week isn't the sort of wages that many clubs in the world can afford. There's maybe PSG, and I would say that is it that could afford to have him. Luckily, I say luckily, not necessarily lucky, but coincidentally, they also aren't particularly well endowed in terms of goalkeepers. So, they could be someone that would be after him. But I think, not that I want De Gea to leave necessarily, but I don't know if we could get rid of him if we wanted to at this point. Someone says, when is the return date? They're looking at June 8th as the return date. Played games between June the 8th and July the 27th. And then the Premier League coming back on, I think it was the 17th of August. De Gea, just when he signs 400k a week, who wouldn't want to stay? Yeah, there is a bit of that. What age is Dean Henderson? Yeah, he's 23, I believe. Play all the matches on the Isle of Man. That could be fun. Does it really hurt Henderson if we loan him for a couple more years? Well, I'm not saying that it necessarily would hurt Dean Henderson if we loaned him for a couple more years, but we're sort of getting towards that uncharted territory where, when have you heard of a player that is Premier League quality be loaned to another Premier League club for 4 years? I don't think I've ever heard of that. I know that, Tom Cleverley and, Harry Kane and people like that, Jesse Lingard have had loan spells out and come back to their clubs and play games, but not usually to other Premier League clubs who then, Dean Henderson isn't just at Sheffield United, he's not like their second choice goalkeeper, but he gets more games than he would at United. He's one of the best goalkeepers in the league. He's a standout player in one of the best and certainly the most overachieving defence and team in the league. So it's a position that I don't think I've ever seen a team in, where you've got, goalkeeper is unique in the sense that you only really need one. I know Romero's a more than capable understudy to De Gea, but if you didn't have Romero, assuming De Gea wasn't injured, goalkeepers can play 50 games a year. So you only really need one, and the alternative is, very good. I don't see what would be wrong with him being there for another 2 years in terms of setting up United. But from his career perspective, it's just a very unusual position where you've essentially let someone have a 4-year contract with another club, and then he's still coming back to United. Very, very interesting, very unusual. If we're loaning him, then we need to loan him to a top team. No disrespect to Sheffield United. Well, what I would say, Anish, on this season's performances, they are a top team. They've got a very similar points total to United currently. I don't think we would loan him to any teams in the Premier League above us. They're all relatively settled in terms of goalkeepers. I think Chelsea is maybe the only team that would take on a new keeper, but they did just spend 70 million on Kepa, regardless of how good he is. Tottenham have got Lloris, City have got Ederson, Liverpool have obviously got Alisson, and we wouldn't loan him to any of them anyway. So unless we sent him somewhere abroad, the problem is most top sides, again, because goalkeeper is such a unique position, there are very few teams that are very top teams that have a goalkeeper on loan. That their first choice goalkeeper is a loan player. That is a very unusual position. I think Sheffield United being 6th or wherever they are is probably as good as you're going to get in terms of the quality of a side he could be playing for. So I don't think there's necessarily a problem with that. Cam Watt says, good to see you. You're being productive this morning, Joe. Thank you very much. It'd be nice to see you a little bit more productive sometimes. Inside joke there. Sheffield United could be above us if they won their game in hand. Exactly. So the suggestion that Dean Henderson isn't at a good club, I think, is going to be not particularly well based. I have to say Henderson has the mindset of wanting to be the best in the world. It's a good mindset to have. Scott McTominay is another one that seems to have that mindset. There's some quotes from over the weekend talking about Cristiano Ronaldo. Not an official bit of news, but we'll talk about it a little bit. Talking about how his training regime, how his physicality, how his physique is something that McTominay is trying to replicate. And you hear stories a few weeks ago, who was it from Jesse Lingard, I think, talking about Scott McTominay is always in the gym looking at himself in the mirror. He does seem to have got that Cristiano Ronaldo physique obsession, which seems a little bit shallow, seems a little bit one-dimensional, but actually when you think about it, if you're an athlete, that's exactly what you need to be like. Your body is your sort of your tool for work, so why would you not want the best tool you could possibly have? It's only like someone who's a joiner wanting the best saw or the best bench or the best vice. Do you know what I mean? It's people act as though Cristiano Ronaldo's vain and he's obsessed with his physique and stuff. That's his job. That's his tool for work. It's not like he's like, oh, everyone wants the new PlayStation, and yet when you stay behind doing 6,000 sit-ups like Cristiano Ronaldo does, people act like he's vain. Well, really, he needs to have the best body available to him. But yeah, I think that mindset talking about Dean Henderson is something that could potentially take him to that next step if he does have the talent, which it seems like he does. Anyway, sounds like me with the mirror. My body's a temple. Mark, I don't believe you. Maybe you look in the mirror a lot, but I don't think your body's a temple. I don't know. It could be. You could have a great body. If the league returns and we make 4th, then happy days. If we don't make 4th, we can blame a virus or decisions of the Premier League. Do you know what? It's win-win. We get to see football, and we've got a built-in excuse. It's perfect. De Gea is still the best shot stopper. Yeah, quite possibly. But yeah, that's going to be all from me today. We're going to be back this afternoon at 4 o'clock for Howson's Brew. That should be a fun one. Thank you everyone at home for joining me. Have a great week. Have a great Monday. Have a great 27th of April 2020, the year of our Lord Jesus Christ. We'll see you next time.